I don't mind calling a professor Professor so-and-so or by their first name, whatever they feel comfortable with, but just as long as you make it clear. Yeah. Sometimes like I get like halfway through the semester and I still don't know what they want me to call them. Put it on the syllabus, sign your emails that way. If you want to be called professor, professor. If you want to be called by your first name, first name. If you have a nickname, or a shortened version of your name, sign your emails that just make it clear, because it makes the communication easier.
I've seen a number of professors they've said that they expect a specific thing in class, but I've had others who said, yeah, just call me John or whatever it was. I stick with professor. I'm from the military, so I'm perhaps more traditional, but I usually just say Professor so-and-so.
On the subject of email, and this is coming from the perspective of someone who has taught, I usually make a big point, and especially as a graduate student, I don't expect my students to call me professor. I say, please call me Diana. A lot of them insist on calling me professor, and that's fine. But then I also particularly get via email a lot of incredibly informal addresses, often just hey, comma. And I and a couple of other graduate students that I've spoken with now try to make a point at the start of classes about talking about email etiquette, because I actually think that extends well beyond just the way that some undergrads, not all, engage with not just graduate student instructors, but also faculty. And I think some of them just have not been told how to email in a way that's polite. So that came to mind as an answer to the question.
And it's better to learn these lessons in class than writing to an employer
right.
after the fact.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I actually was earlier in the PhD orientation for engineering, and that was a question to the faculty panel. So just to recap what the panel said, is they would prefer their PhD students to use their first name. A lot of PhD students in the orientation were a bit surprised, but the main thing was for the PhD students to start to see their professors as their peers and not as someone who's higher than them, although there is a mentoring relationship. So I think for PhD students, it's a bit harder. It was very intimidating for me when I interviewed my PI to refer to her by her first name. At sometimes it's still very hard for me when I talk to someone and say, oh, her first name. It's very hard for me, but I think it's something that's nice to have. It's definitely made a difference when I was doing my master's and I would refer to my PI as professor. So having that first name basis as a graduate student, for me, makes a lot of difference.
When I kind of think of how sometimes professors have addressed me and how that's changed my relationship with the professor, mainly of which was not a lot of the times, but sometimes it had been very informal, even a little bit degrading, of bud or kiddo, which is something my grandpa calls me bud or kiddo. So that was something I was thinking about. I think a lot of times students give a lot of formality and a lot of respect to the professors, but it's not often, but just sometimes it hasn't been received or reflected towards faculty to students.